All right, welcome everybody. This Q&A is telling my husband what the married kids told me. Growing up, my daughter Tamar always spoke to me about any issue she was going through, and even now that she's married, she still does. I'm assuming the reason Tamar speaks to me and not my husband is only because it's natural to talk to your mother about these kinds of things. I never thought twice about sharing Tamar's issues with my husband while she was growing up. Do I have to ask my children before sharing their issues with my husband, their father? And do things change when they get married? I really like this.
Yes, you have to ask.
Yes. Okay, yes. Why would you have to ask? If it's their own father.
Because they're adults and they're not living in the house, and there's things that, especially a woman and a mother, are going to have conversations that a daughter and a father shouldn't have a conversation about.
All right. Yeah. Great point. Great point. I feel like one point to make. Welcome, Anat. One point to be made is there a tolus for speaking to her husband? It doesn't say that there's any particular issue, right? But does anyone that it could be okay? I mean, it's still their father, still her
Father's
husband.
supposed to know everything. No. Father's supposed to know everything. Everything must father know.
No. Yes, you need to know everything that we do. Everything.
Please repeat the question.
I don't agree.
Yes.
Listen to Donna in the background.
Sorry?
Listen to Donna. She knows what she's talking about here.
The question, there was a whole scenario. They're just talking about how this woman was saying that her daughter always spoke to her about certain issues going on in her life, but never spoke to her husband about these things. And she said never really thought twice about sharing her daughter Tamar's information with her husband. But now she has a question. Do I have to ask my children before sharing their issues with my husband, who is their father? And do things change when they get married? Right? She doesn't really think about it. Her daughter's sharing things with her. It could be at the age Chucker was pointing out as an adult. But even yeah, she's saying, the woman is saying, I just would share this with my husband. I didn't really think twice about doing it because it's my kid's life, and it's his kids also, their father. They could be at the age of 5 when they're coming home from school talking about things, age of 12, and even as adults. And she's saying her daughter Tamara is now married. So her question was, is it okay that she's speaking to her husband about it? And now that she's married, does it make a difference? This is a really great question.
It's the husband's thing now. So your father knows that until you're married, you're his property. I know that's not the right word, but that's like kind of what it is. And then you get married and now you're your husband's.
That's right. You're my property.
All right. So Chakwa's point of view is
Father know everything.
Sorry?
Father know everything. Very important. Father must know everything.
So what Chakra was
mothers know everything, not the fathers.
It's not okay once they're married and adults, right?
Is that the answer?
That's what Chakra's saying. Am I correct?
No, but I'm saying I like
that's
to know.
Right.
I think it's really just depend on what it is, like what are they talking about that you're sharing. I mean, if it's like a childish thing, this, if it's something important about the child's safety or something dangerous that the child might into, that's something that you do need to involve, obviously, your husband, but it's something personal. I mean, you do have your mom-daughter kind of relationship that it's different than dad's relationship. So it's really just depend on really what it is that they're talking and sharing.
Yeah, so you're saying if there's a tuelas, if there's a constructive purpose to speak to your husband about, then for sure. But what in general, let's say there's no tuelas, let's say there's no constructive purpose at all, and just the fact that it's their father and her husband, would that does that make it okay? I believe my father would say, yes, of course, it's your father.
No, it does not make it okay. There is a
It
Yes,
makes it
mom-daughter
okay.
relationship, and I tell my mom stuff that my dad know everything about me, and I tell my mom stuff that I don't mind telling my dad, but it's none of his business. It's,
Right.
it's
That made me laugh.
Father's business.
No.
It's the business when the husband says he can share the information.
no, this is personal business. Unless
Wow.
it's
I feel like this
harmful
is a
for a
really great
child,
question.
unless it is something harmful for the child that it can do something harmful. It's a personal business. It's
I think these are all wonderful answers. I want to see what they have to say because actually, in this scenario, I have an opinion, but I just want to see what they have to say. Okay, there's no blanket heter for, and we know that a heter is a leniency given, right? For a wife to share information like lashon hara or things spoken in confidence with her husband, unless it's a very serious issue that would need her husband's input, which is exactly what you guys said,
Right.
especially you, not right, and Sharon.
No, but I'm not said it. Yeah.
But you're agreeing, so
Right.
and which you need your husband's input. If information was spoken in confidence and it's understood that the child wants only the mother to know what is being spoken about, that wish should be respected. If you would like to share the information with your husband, it would be wise to ask your daughter, can I share this with Abba? Besides knowing you can share, you'll also be transmitting a wonderful lesson that you're careful about what you say. And I feel like also it makes it feel like it's more in confidence. Like, oh, is it okay if I give this information over to your father? Like, I'm not telling him everything that you say.
Right.
So, yep. So,
so it means
correct.
mommy know the best, not the dad. Mommy know the best.
Oh, Dad, did you hear that?
Dad and Adam, did you hear that?
Father know best.
Wait, what did that say?
I missed it.
She said father know best.
No, she didn't.
She said mothers know better than fathers.
Yeah.
Many controversial statements being made right now. I feel like we need to shut
And
down this class.
so far, Anat was right, according to
Father know
Chofetz Chaim's
better.
book. Anat was right.
You guys are great. All right. So we went into we were in principle 1 and we just did principle 1, correct? I believe so. So I'm going to do a quick review of principle 1 so we can move on to principle 2. Sound cool? All right. So it is forbidden to speak demeaningly about one's friends. Lashon hara is the truth, right? What would it be called if it was false information?
Lion.
Wow, it gets funnier every time you say it, Chakro. How is that even possible?
Absolutely.
Dad, what's it called? I know you guys know it. Welcome, Daniel. Remember?
Mama.
My sister just called up from the back. Moti Shemra, Hotzas Shemra. Wonderful. You shall not go tale-bearing among your people. You should not bear a false report. If one spoke demeaningly of one's friends by chance, you shouldn't be a Bali Lashon Hara, which is someone who is a man of Lashon Hara, who just goes around speaking Lashon Hara. God forbid. May none of us be that way. Then the 3 transgressions that a person has no share in Olam Haba are idolatry, illicit relations, and blood spilling, and Lashon Hara is worse than all 3. There's no difference if someone speaks Lashon Hara of their own volition or if someone forced them to tell him. Then next one is surround yourself with Torah scholars. Lashon Hara is forbidden even where one's personal honor is at stake. It is Lashon Hara whether it is by mouth, sign, or letter. I feel like that one's really, really important. I mean, all of these are super important, but sometimes I feel like we try to find our own leniencies. And so it's like, oh, I didn't say it because Lashon Hara, Lashon, speech, but it isn't really just speech, it's so much deeper than that. And it is slander if he's demeaning himself while demeaning his friend with the very same slur. All right. Now we're on principle 2. And if anyone wants to follow along, I can send my Sefaria notes or my link, and you could follow along in the Sefaria app where it has Shmir Salashon in detail. Okay. I'm trying to find chat. Oh, there it is. Would you guys want me to send the link so you guys follow along in the notes?
I don't know if I know how to find it. Oh, you mean if I'll just click on it?
Yeah, so let me
Oh, okay.
try to get the link to my notes, which I know I texted to myself at some point. I text myself a lot of things to remember. Okay. Okay, this should be it. I think I have the same link even when I update it, so I believe this should be correct. If anyone has any questions while you're following along, please let me know. All right. Principle 2. It is forbidden to speak demeaningly of one's friends, even if it's the absolute truth, and even before one, and especially before many. The more listeners, the bigger the sin. And if you make several people go astray, in the Isser, the prohibition of listening to Lashon Hara. So it says he does make people go astray by causing people to listen to the Lashon Hara, which we actually went on in more depth in the Patience is laying on my foot. In the coming principles, we discussed how it is against halacha to even listen to the Lashon Hara, right? So by saying the Lashon Hara, you're causing people to listen and you're making them sin. And it's saying the more people, the bigger the sin. And we would think, oh, yeah, I mean, one person, more people. For some people, it could make sense. And I mean, for me, it makes sense. The more people who hear it, the more people who can spread it, God forbid. So that is one thing. Okay, this is Apei Tlasa. Does anyone remember Apei Tlasa when we first went through it? I believe Daniel was there and Chakra was there in my class. I don't know if you guys remember. It's a leniency that we spoke about that we don't go by anymore. Is that ringing a bell to anyone? I believe also Tina Lack was there. And Circa. Hi, Circa. It's Apei Tlasa is speaking before 3. And does anyone know why speaking before 3 could be a heter, a leniency for speaking Lashon Hara?
No,
No? It's okay. I'm glad we're
I
doing
don't know.
this. That's a really good review. So speaking before 3 could end up being leniency because if it's spoken before 3 people, at that point it could be considered.
I know.
Yeah? Was that you? Who was that?
Yeah, that was that.
I can't have a little tiny screen. I can't see you speaking. Yeah, so after three people have heard information, it could technically be considered public knowledge before 3 people. So as there is a heter, a halachic permit, leniency, loophole. Those are all the words I use. I call it a leniency. Of Chazal speak before 3, Apei Tlasa. This is when something is not an absolute taint, which is understood in 2 ways. How they're said. If something is said in the presence of 3, it is expected that will get back to the subject's ears. So this that what he says will not be taken negatively. So when it's spoken before 3 people, hopefully the speaker has in his mind that this will get back to the person and will not speak negatively of the subject he's speaking of. Does that make sense?
So if you speak Lashon Hara, do it in groups of 3.
and a really great point it makes at the end of the section, at the end of the principle. Where is it? It says, we do not follow this leniency. And I did it in all caps when I first had it. I don't know where I put it now. But we do not follow this leniency. We do not just, if it's spoken in front of 3 people, say, well, now I can just tell it to everybody. that is not what we go by anymore. Okay, so then we have okay, so then it has an example, and this is a very well-known example. Someone walks by, someone comes into a town, and they said, where can I stay? Where can I go? And then the person says, you can go over there. They say, the person says, where can I find a fire? And the person says, you can go over there. They always have a fire, right? They always have a fire lit over there. So how could that be taken positively and negatively? Think back. This is a very, very old example. Chucker, you should know this one.
Positive, that they're like Avraham and always welcoming people, and negative, they're feeding fuel on Shabbat.
Very good. I don't believe it's a Shabbos one. I mean, maybe there's another way that for sure could be taken negatively if we're saying, oh, always including Shabbos. It could also mean like, oh, are they sort of hoarding food? They eat a lot. Are they eating all the time? They always have meals, right? Or it could be, like Chucker said, they're always hosting people. They always have a fire open for guests. So they're in the idea of Apei Tlasa, it's like they're saying in front of 3 people, knowing it could get back to the subject. Why would they want to say something negative? We also need to make sure that in the way it's being said, it's taken in a positive way. And I have a personal example where I was speaking to a teacher who, this person wasn't Jewish, and I was talking about Israelis, and I was saying something really funny about Israelis, and I thought it was a funny joke. They didn't understand the joke, and they took it very seriously. They go, oh my gosh, really? Israelis are like that? And I realized that even though I took it very well, and I thought of it as a very light, funny joke, I actually ended up saying Lashon Hara because the other person didn't understand. Okay. If one speaks immediately of his friends before 3, he transgresses the Isser prohibition of Lashon Hara. I don't know what's wrong with my S's and my SH's, but I'll work on that. If one of the 3 who heard the Lashon Hara told it to others, he does not transgress the prohibition, because if 3 have become known to it, it's considered to be known to everyone, because this idea of your friend has a friend. So this is why it's a heter or leniency, and this is also why we don't go by it, because there's so much involved that we really couldn't fit all the different requirements, and it being okay. Anything we do would still technically be considered Lashon Hara. The Torah does not forbid as Lashon Hara something which is bound to be known. And like I said, if it's spoken before 3, it could technically end up being considered public knowledge. As this only
A
relates.
question though, didn't we say public knowledge is still a Lashon Hara?
We said spoken in front of many people. That's a very good point. Spoken
Because we were
before
talking
people
about
is
like when we like mention about an article or something, and it's a public knowledge, it's in the news, but that person didn't know about it. And now because we mention it to him, so we already mentioned that is Lashon Hara. And everything now
right.
in the media is, even though it's public knowledge, unless that specific person knew about it, it's still considered Lashon Hara.
Yeah, and that's an amazing point. And that is a point that we ended up making a few months ago, I think, when we were speaking about one of the examples of a newspaper article and it talking negatively about a community, and then saying, oh, well, I mean, it's public knowledge now, but in that sense, not everybody does read the newspaper. Not everybody does read those articles. So then in that sense, yes. And like we spoke about before, when I said the more people you're speaking in front of, the bigger the sin. This is actually not saying that. This is saying that if you're talking and this is something that's already known, you're not telling them any new information. And so it's not Lashon Hara because it's nothing new. It's nothing new. Everybody knows about it already. So I believe that's the point it gets down to. It's the fact it's still speaking negatively about somebody, but people already know about it. That's why this this heter, it's telling us all the laws, but also ends up saying don't follow it because there's so many different parts to it. If that makes any sense. It's really it's very interesting. Okay, and even if someone does not mention the name of who told, and so as to not be rechilus, and rechilus is gossip mongering, right? When the purpose is to publicize, and this would be an example. This is an example that I made myself, but I feel like there could be a few flaws in it. If someone posted something on Instagram or Facebook, and it's bound to be known to many people, and you've accidentally let it slip about the post, even if the person doesn't follow them on social media, it could technically be considered public knowledge. But like we said, it comes very close to the example of, okay, this is an article in a newspaper, but not everybody in that community who it's talking, I think it was calling out certain people in the community who did bad things. And it's saying, oh, should I show this article to someone? They may have, I don't know if they have seen the article. I don't think they really read the newspaper in general. And so that is still Lashon Hara. Okay. But they're saying in this sense, we're separating ourselves from, that's still Lashon Hara. We're just saying this is under the heter of Apei Tlasa. The heter leniency to repeat to another when there is no intent to publicize it only applies to the first here. So first of all, one thing of Apei Tlasa is the intent should not be that it should become public knowledge. So that takes away your theory, Chakra. And then it's saying that this is the first here, right? So there's one speaker, and then there are 3 hearers. So it's saying these first people, right, the hearers, then it's okay because they're hearing the information firsthand. But what about when someone from this group decides to go and talk to another 3 people, and then someone from this group wants to tell over the information, right? And then it becomes sort of broken telephone situation. Has anyone ever played broken telephone? And then you sort of, I know I've done it with Circa before when we were younger. You whisper something, and then you could even try to be as like clear as possible, but you could say it really fast and be like, oh my gosh, and blah 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 blah, and then you pass it on, and by the end it's something completely different. I mean, also we were joking around, but it is the same idea. It passes from one person to another person, and details change, ideas change, things are exaggerated. If we're counting the presence of 3, and even if one is a God-fearing man of the first 3, right? And sorry. Oh, and the presence of 3, and they're God-fearing men who guard themselves against prohibition of Lashon Hara, then the report is bound to not be heard, and it is forbidden to tell over. So let's say one person is speaking to 3 people, and even just one of them is a God-fearing man, right? So it's not technically being spoken in front of 3 people in which it will be publicized. So if we're saying, okay, 3 people who are God-fearing men, obviously it's not going to get the information is not going to get out. But even if just one of those 3 guys was a God-fearing man, and it's like, oh, then only 2 people may possibly let the information out, but that one person who's a God-fearing man won't, then that's not speaking in front of 3, and that's not technically going to be considered public information, public knowledge. And then it's the Apei Tlasa says 3 potential publicizers, which is what it says. And this can also be the judgment if one of the 3 is a relative or a close friend of the person being slandered because they would not publicize it. So they're saying if one of those 3 is a God-fearing man, a relative, or a close friend of the subject being spoken about or person being slandered. This is also only permitted if in that city the report was heard by 3, but not in a different city. So within that city, it's public knowledge, but right outside of that city, it's not. And I feel like that's where the article comes into play, right? This was an article that was outside the city, so it wasn't public knowledge to the people in the city, which is quite, I don't remember all the details of that article, but of that question, Q&A that we did, but I'm really glad that you brought that up, Anat. Thank you so much. If the speaker urges the hearers not to reveal it, even if it's said before many, it would be lashon hara. For someone to reveal, it would be lashon hara for someone to reveal it afterwards, even if it's by chance. So let's say one person speaks before three and is like, "Please, please, please, do not say anything. Do not tell anybody I told you." And one of those three people accidentally lets it slip, it's lashon hara. And even if he sees that one of the hearers or two did not heed what he asked for and revealed what he had to others, in spite of this third listener may reveal the thing to others even by chance. Okay. And then I think I had an article here. I don't know why. Rechilos is forbidden even when told to one person. Let's see how we are on time. Okay, probably do one more. Running out of time. Okay. There's no difference in the language of exhortation, whether he urged them not to mention the subject or at all anymore, or whatever choice of words he used. It is forbidden to reveal the demeaning of another, even to a different person. How much more so to the person who is being demeaned, because it is revealed to another. In the end, it will become known to all, and even to the person being demeaned. So in the beginning, we were saying it's going to end up getting back to the listener. So we're saying, well, the more so if it ends up getting back to the listener, right? Someone could have the chutzpah of saying, okay, fine, I wouldn't mind if this was said straight to his face, but that's a problem. That's complete lashon hara, even and especially to his face. And then it goes back to your friend has a friend, which is why it's public knowledge. The heter leniency of Apei Tlasa applies only if there are three hearers, not two who spoke before two. So even if it ends up equaling four, if you have two speakers and two listeners, it does not count. It's not equal to one speaker and three listeners. All this that we have said applies to this prohibition of repeating it itself, but God forbid to even add one word or to embroider one thing before the hearer, it is completely forbidden, since he thereby harms him with his words, more than he would have harmed him himself had he heard the original report within the normal dynamics of Apei Tlasa. And by adding to the original report, he will could it be accepted as true, which we know also for the hearer is completely wrong, and is also a sin, and is forbidden by all poskim. So I feel like I'm going to end it here for now. But this point, which I sort of brushed over before, is that to even change one word, to even exaggerate, or to, as they put, embroider, which I take this straight from the Sefer Chofetz Chaim, it changes the whole idea, and it's complete lashon hara to just even change one thing. And who knows, even through the idea of broken telephone, something could be changed, and it may even not be purposeful, right? It could be by accident that we embroider some parts and exaggerate, enhance certain parts of the story, but all the more so it is considered to be lashon hara. And the point, before anyone goes on saying, "Woo, spoken before three people, it's okay to tell over," don't speak lashon hara. That's the point. But even if you've spoken before three people, don't tell it over. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. I really appreciate you all being here, my regulars. It's such an honor and pleasure to have you, especially an hour later than usual. So I hope everyone has an amazing evening.
Me too.
And I hope to see you all next week, and some of you maybe on Shabbos.
Okay.
Thank you so much
Good
for
night.
joining.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.